welcome to the Force 10 Racing Channel. This is Troy Robotech Lyman. I'm your host today. And today we're going to talk about the RPM Motorsports Big Shot air intake and oil catch can. Now this is on a 2.4 liter quote-unquote base model platform. And so what you see here is going to be a little bit different than you'd find if you had a 2.4 and got this intake, or even if you have the 2-liter turbo car and get this intake. There are things about it that are the same between both, and there are things about it that are different between both. So now, the first thing I want you to notice is the dual air filter element on the intake. That is one reason I love the way this thing looks. I prefer to call this a hammerhead intake. I usually refer to it as a hammerhead intake because that's what it reminds me of, is a hammerhead shark. That may be copyright or something. That may be why RPM goes with the term big shot rather than hammerhead, but hey, if it's not taken, Martin, feel free to use that. That particular aspect of it will be the same no matter if you have the 2-liter or the 2.4 liter. That part of the assembly is the same. You have two twin cones. Where it changes is right about this joint here. And what changes on the 2-liter car, it's going to look pretty much like it does here. On the 2.4 though, this is going to turn the other direction, head over to where that blue pipe you see there is, and head back to the throttle body there, because that's where it is on the 2.4. This is a charge pipe coming from the intercooler for my turbo setup on the 2.4, and you'll see that it has a MAF sensor in it. In the 2.4's regular NA intake, this is where the MAF sensor sits, and that's why it's here on this pipe, is that's just where you locate it with the 2.4 turbo setups. And that is how this pipe will differ from the 2.0 setup. In the 2.0 turbo cars, that MAF sensor sits right about here, and so this pipe will have a MAF sensor bung and a plort for that right here in the pipe. The other thing about the 2-liter that's a little bit different than 2.4 is this vent line. Now on the 2-liter, this vent line is over here. I believe it has the PVC in it, and it runs up here to the intake. And this is the part on the intake, on the stock intake, that is phenomenally known for braking. It's a little plastic nipple that sticks out of the plastic intake, and at the base it'll crack and it'll eventually break. A number of people have had this happen to them, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons why people will change out an intake on the 2-liter. Performance-wise, you don't get a huge difference on the 2-liter. 2.4, you pick up a lot of low-end torque. Maximum horsepower stays about the same, but you do pick up a lot of torque below that peak horsepower number on the 2.4 liter. On the 2-liter, most people have found out you don't get a lot of performance gain from it. There's a difference in noise, and some people like that, and some people don't. But other than that, the biggest reason why they replace it is because of this broken nipple that would be right about here. Now, this being a 2.4 liter car, normally we have this vent line here, and this vent line normally will run from this part on the valve cover over here to the intake. There's a nipple here on the intake that would take it, and if you get the 2.4 liter version of this intake, it'll have a nipple here too for this vacuum. However, we're running a catch can. The original catch can actually sat right down there where that screw is that mounts this intake to the bumper. So obviously going to this intake, I had to move that somewhere else, and in doing so, I got RPM's new oil catch can. And this oil catch can is friggin' slick. I took it apart while I had it off the car because my original catch can really didn't do a lot. Didn't catch anything. I'd look at it, go to drain it, and nothing come out. And I don't know if it's because the catch can is a little cheapy eBay thing that I threw some steel wool in. Didn't really have a baffle in it that, like an inlet-outlet baffle. It was just kind of there. And so it just didn't do anything. Now, I don't know if that's because the catch can just was bad or because we don't need a catch can and we don't really get a lot of oil in that part of the intake track. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. However, I can tell you this much. This RPM catch can is a completely different animal than what I had down there from eBay. The main difference is I took this apart, and inside you have a steel wool filter for system, just like I tried to use on my other catch can. But on top of that, you have a specific inlet and a specific outlet, actually 2 outlets. And it is important to get this flow right. So what RPM has done, they made sure that your inlet fitting is a -8 AN fitting, and your outlets are -6 AN fittings, a smaller fitting. What this means is you can't hook them up backwards. You can only plug this in one way. You can only route this one way, with this being the inlet and these being the outlets. So in doing that and having a real nice filtration system in there, it has a nice baffle system in there where this comes into. It's set up to be a true catch can and really be effective. So if I'm getting any oil coming out of this port from the valve cover, which is also where my PVC system is, this is going to catch it. Guaranteed. So if this comes out dry, it's just because there's nothing there. The other nice thing about this that the other one didn't have is if you look, I'm going to see if I can get this, it's really hard to angle in here. If you look down here, you're going to see there's a little red like lever thing at the base of this catch can. I hope this is catching. I really can't see because I can't bend my head this way around the hood. Anyway, that little lever, that's a lever to release a valve on the bottom of this catch can. That's your drain valve. So you can put a cup under there, you can run a line to it, run it down to the bottom of the car, and put your oil pan under it, and you release that valve, and that's going to drain that catch can. You don't have to unscrew it, you don't have to unmount it, you don't have to bolt it, nothing. You just flip that little lever, it drains. When you're done, you flip it back. Real nice, real clean, really simple to use. I love it. I would have gone, if I didn't even know it had that, I would have gone to this setup regardless if I was going to this intake, just because it is such a nice, clean, professional looking catch can setup for our car. And I think this is going to be very effective. As far as the intake is concerned, installation was fairly simple. Like I said, I didn't show you installation on this. I was going to, but because my intake was, no, let's face it, it's over there. It was completely homemade. It had one little coupler on it with a clamp. All I had to do is take off this coupler here that you see, this little worm drive coupler, loosen that, pull it off, the whole intake came out in one shot. I threw it over in the corner. If your stock intakes, whether you're 2.4 2-liter, are a little more complex than that. They have a couple more bolts. As a matter of fact, the bolt that's up there in the bumper that you see for this one, that is one of the bolts that holds in your stock airbox, so you reuse that bolt in that mounting location. You usually have a little more baffling. I know with the 2.4 liter, there is a huge airbox that sits off the intake over there by the fender that you don't see here, that hasn't been on my car since 2006. For good reason. It's only there to reduce noise. You will find these make more noise, like I mentioned before. That can be a good thing or bad thing. I would highly suggest that you try one of these cars, or drive a car, or ride in a car that has an intake, because you can at least get an idea of what the sound difference is going to be. Getting back to the installation though, the only hiccup we had was in this coupler, and it wasn't anything to do with RPM. It had completely to do with me. I'm running a WR4 turbo from Performance Auto Works, and the inlet in it, even though it's supposed to be about the same size as the KO4s, which you see sitting over there on my floor, it's slightly bigger. And I remember this after I got the intake and tried to put the coupler on that came with this intake, because it's a 2¼ inch to 3 inch coupler. And the 2¼ you can squeeze on to the KO4. You can't on the WR4. It is slightly bigger, and just enough to where, especially in this tight little confines that we have here in our engine bay, trying to get that on the turbo, not easy. So I got a 2.5 inch to 3 inch adapter coupler there, and that sit on the turbo. It didn't slide on. You still had to kind of work it a little bit to get it seated, and then once it got seated, it slid on, but it's in there nice and snug. It holds it secure. The worm drive clamp, not the ideal clamp, not the best clamp in the world, those little hose clamps, but those worm drive clamps, when you're talking about an intake like this that doesn't see pressure, it's only seeing a vacuum, it's not going to go anywhere. That clamp is mainly there to make sure that makes a tight seal around that. It's not necessary to hold the intake on. The intake will probably stay on by itself. It's only meant to ward against vibrating off from whether the engine's running. It's more than enough to do that. When you're talking about your boost pipes, like here at your turbo coupler, or down at your intercooler over there on your throttle body, these couplers see boost pressure. They see those kind of pressures that will blow them off and decouple them. These, you want to have some good T-bolt clamps like you see here. Something strong, something tight, something that's really hold those on securely. Down here, not quite as important. Now we use the T-bolt clamp here on the 3 inch side just because we had it. That came with the kit. This is what comes with the kit, these T-bolt clamps. There was a 2¼ inch clamp that came with this that just would not fit over the coupler. No matter what we would have done, it would not have fit, which is why we used my worm drive clamp. Again, that's not Martin's doing, that's my doing, because this intake was built specifically for me to my specs. Kind of, sort of. I mean, I basically told him, look, build a 2-liter intake. It's the exact same shape, because it's the exact same setup. The only difference is I don't need a MAF bung, and the nipple for the vacuum line, for the vent line, is still going to be there. It's just that it's going to be coming from the valve cover on the driver's side to your catch can, and from the catch can to here. So make that however you need to make it. So that's what we did. Only thing I wanted to note is this line on the catch can came with the 90-degree fitting you see here on one end, and on this end down here that you really can't see because it's really tight. So on this end of the line, where you see this 90 here, it came with a straight line. So what you would have had done, because this will not clear, this fitting screwed here will not clear this part of the turbo outlet without it being 90. If this was a straight up fitting, to the other side, that straight up fitting, it would have come and hit that pipe. So it has to be a 90. So I would have put the 90 there, and then that 90 would have gone out like this around the intake and then come back in here to the catch can. Nothing wrong with that. That would have worked just fine. No problem with that whatsoever. But I wanted it a little cleaner. So I went to a local hose shop. They put this 90 on here for me. Shortened the line some because it didn't be as long. And now we get this nice, clean, short little line going back up to the catch can. But you do have to be wary that when you put the intake in, this line needs to be on the intake before you put it in the car. Because if you don't have this line installed already, you will never get that line on that adapter that is sitting on the intake. It just won't happen. Good news is you don't have to worry about lining it up just right, because when we're screwing this into a quick fitting here, quick disconnect fitting, and that fitting can swivel around. So once you get it nice and secure on here, you can move this line around and adjust it so you get it right at the right angle you need to mate up with the catch can, which is what I did. Like that, again, the clearances are really, really tight. It fit perfectly. You couldn't. It's like someone had made this for this car on this car, and considering it was made in Arizona and shipped here without any fittings, without any guarantees that we had the clearances right, having to trim one line and put on an extra fitting, it was $13. Piece of cake. I had it done in a day. Not a big deal. Just something that you want to be aware of. Something I've mentioned to Martin, so he'll be aware of it. But yeah. This is it was a great fit. The intake, when you're installing it, we mentioned already that you need the coupler here, but really all you have, you put this line on, secure it, and tighten it down because you won't have room to do so afterwards. I put the coupler on the turbo, secured it with this, and then put this T-clamp on and just kind of slid that down with it loose. Then slid the intake without the air filters on. That's important. If you have the air filters on, you try and put it in here, it will not go, because you really need some room to maneuver it to get these twists and turns of this intake in underneath this charge pipe. I did not take off my charge pipe. I did not take off any of this stuff here. Obviously the catch can wasn't in place, but I actually had it in place when I put the intake back in. I did remove this. There's a little bracket for my boost control solenoid. I just removed that so I had more room to work in here when I was working, when I was fitting it. But again, that's one bolt, really easy to take off, put back on. And if you have a turbo car, that won't be there. You will have your power steering pump reservoir here if you haven't relocated like I did, which we'll talk about in a second. So you may need to move that out of the way to give yourself some more room, just to make things easier, but that may not be a necessity. It's been so long since I had my power steering pump there, my reservoir there, I don't remember how close it would be. But definitely have the air filters off, and then once you have this in place, leave that bolt down there undone. I went ahead and moved this clamp up here, clamped it down to secure the intake after I made sure the bolt hole lined up. Then I threw in the filters from this side, just down to those little spaces they're in, and then came around over here, made sure these clamps were in a place where I could get to them from this side using a ratchet extension. Forget a flathead screwdriver, but you could if you needed to. Put them on the pipe on here, and that's why you want to leave this bolt out, so you're going to need to move that pipe kind of back and forth a little bit to get one side on and then the other. And you have room to do that, and then kind of push them together from both ends to make sure they're seated. Get these aligned so where you can get your tool on them. Screw those down. Once that's on, then I put the bolt through here and secured this at the very last. As you can see, it's very tight fitting over here. You don't have a lot of room, and this is, again, 2.4. It won't be so bad because you don't have that big honking 3-inch cold side pipe there. Even on the 2 liters, if you're running stock charge pipes, or even upgraded charge pipes. I think they're only 2.5-inch charge pipes, so they're half an inch smaller than that, which is considerably smaller. On the 2.4s, we have to run 0.75 or 3-inch pipe, just because of the way our MAF is set up and the way our original intake was set up. But it does fit. It fits very well. I have started up. It fired right up, ran like a champ. The only thing is I couldn't take it for a drive, and that brings us back to the power steering reservoir. As you can see, we had a little problem here with this. That's supposed to go like that. Yeah. So this bolt was loose. We'd actually lost the nut, the mounting bolt we have here, and we put a new nut. We put a new nut on the bolt. The bolt was still there, but the nut was gone. Put a new bolt in, a new nut on the bolt, tightened it down, and when we did, it got tightened a little too much, and this tab snapped. That tab's part of the reservoir. Now, they don't make these anymore, so it's not like I can go. Luckily, in our RPM makes a metal reservoir just for this reason, because these are discontinued. Not only do they make one in metal, but you can get it in any color you want, and it just doesn't have to be black like Ford. It can be whatever color you want, and so they are in the process of powder coating that same orange. And I'm meant to just talk about this real quick. RPM builds all this stuff in-house, from the welding to the powder coating. These are all assembled in-house, same with their charge pipes, and that's also RPM's charge pipe over there, by the way. These are all built in-house, powder coated in-house. They didn't do that one. I painted that one myself, just saying. Well, I had a friend of mine paint that because I can't draw like that to save my life. And if you notice, this orange is very close to this orange. This orange, these two pieces here were actually powder coated by Performance Auto Works back in Indiana. I believe they're in Indiana. And RPM had no idea what exact color those were. Their intake doesn't match perfectly, but it's really close. Unless you know they're a little different and you really look, it's not noticeable that they're a little off. It's very close, close enough. And this is going to be the same color as that, which will bring a little more color over this side of the engine bay instead of all this orange down the center. But we hope to get that. As a matter of fact, I ordered that one, and I also found a guy that was selling a OEM reservoir and a relocation mount that's a little nicer than this one I made online. And so last week, the first thing I did was order the one from Martin, and Martin was like, okay, yeah, we should be able to get out to you first thing Monday. This happened on Saturday. I said, okay, perfect. Well, Monday his powder coat gun broke down, so he couldn't get it out. So I called up the guy that had the one for sale, the OEM one for sale, and I said, hey, go ahead and send me that one. I'll get you that one from you. He shipped it. Martin got his gun fixed. Martin shipped his. They are scheduled to be here on the same day. So hopefully I'll use the new bracket. I'll use the new metal reservoir. We'll get those installed, and when we do, I'll be able to give you guys a road video of what this sounds like when it's running and driving. Anyway, that's it for today. Again, this is Robotech Lyman. I thank you for tuning in today to the Force 10 Racing channel, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.